This event happened so long ago that many of the details are somewhat hazy. It wasn't like it took place just yesterday. I'll do my best to fill in the smaller parts with how I remember them. It was the final day of school and I was in 4th grade. In our school, 4th graders still needed their parents to pick them up, while 5th graders could walk home by themselves. My mum was always the one to come get me, especially on the last day. My friend Dennis and I planned a playdate to celebrate the end of the school year. Although Dennis wasn't in my class that year, we'd been friends since kindergarten. He was dismissed from a different hallway than I was. After the bell rang, we lined up and exited the building, waiting with our teacher, Miss Blue. I looked around, watching parents come and go, waiting to see Dennis's dad. Then I heard my name. I turned to see a man waving as he walked towards me. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and explained he'd be picking me up. I went over to Miss Blue and let her know. She asked me to point him out and I showed her Dennis's uncle, who waved back at her. She dismissed me and I left with the man. He moved quickly through the crowd, speaking in a rushed and jittery way, almost as if he was nervous. He walked so fast that I struggled to keep up with my backpack on. He told me that Dennis's dad had to work late and that he'd be taking me home instead. When we reached his car, which I remember as a dark red hatchback, it suddenly struck me. Where was Dennis? Why weren't we picking him up too? The man turned to me in the back seat and told me Dennis was already at his house. I was shy around strangers, especially adults, so even though I was confused, I didn't ask too many questions. During the drive, he kept talking, sharing stories, and asking about my school and sports. I was getting more and more uneasy. The drive felt unusually long, considering that my house was only a short walk from the school. Eventually, we reached his house, which looked like any other. He led me inside, locked the door, and the room felt almost like nighttime because all the curtains were drawn. I asked him where Dennis was, and he hesitated, saying Dennis was downstairs playing video games. He then disappeared into another room, opening a door and heading down some stairs. My heart was racing and I started to panic. I went to the door to try and unlock it, but it required a key. Feeling desperate, I went to the kitchen, found a phone and dialed 911. I whispered to them to come, saying I'd been taken, and left the line open. Just as I returned to the main room, I heard his footsteps. He called for me, saying Dennis was waiting downstairs, but when I didn't respond, he came back up. His friendly expression changed when he realized I wasn't following. He grabbed my wrist and began dragging me toward the basement. I was terrified and tried to resist, but he said he'd let me go if I stayed quiet. I obeyed and walked down to the basement, feeling sick with fear. Down there it was dark, and there was only a dim, hanging bulb casting a yellowish light. I waited, and after a while, he locked me in. Then, I heard the doorbell ringing and loud banging sounds. Soon I realized the police had arrived. I screamed and banged on the door until a police officer opened it and led me outside. The man was taken away in handcuffs. That was the last time I saw him. My parents, especially my mum, were beside themselves. The man had been an acquaintance of Dennis's father and used that knowledge to take advantage of the situation. I went through counselling afterward, and I'm thankful every day that I thought to call for help when I did.